afternoon and welcome to this sector webinar. Today we'll be discussing 10 reasons why visibility of your data is key to project success. This webinar is being run under the legal project management sector. Today we're joined by Sophie Newbould. She's co-founder of Athensys. So this webinar is in placement of our usual seminars, which are designed to build a project management community, as I referenced, in the legal sector. We're hoping that physical events will soon be reinstated, but we're looking like this will be sort of in September. So the webinar will run for 60 minutes. It will consist of 30 minutes of knowledge share and 30 minutes of Q&A. A little bit of a background on Sophie. She's an experienced projects lawyer, starting in the PFI contracts over 20 years ago. In the most recent years, Sophie has acted for central government, national programmes and the local government and the emergency services on a variety of major projects and complex contracts. Sophie became co-founder for Athensys in 2019, believing in their specially written technology to improve the delivery and success for major projects. So without further ado, I hand you over to Sophie, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the introduction, Lauren, and thank you to the APM for inviting me to conduct this webinar this afternoon. And thank you to all those that have sort of taken an interest in the title of the webinar and joined in to listen today. So without further ado, so in terms of an outline of the approach to topic today, the first sort of part of the talk, I just wanted to go into the background, the background as to why I decided to approach this particular topic to the legal project management market. And then the meaning of the words, sort of looking at the sort of the meaning of the words used in the title, just so that we're kind of all on the same sort of page. Then just looking at 10 reasons as to why my view is that the project data, whether that's legal management project data or customer project data, is just so important now for project success, and that's based on my experience to date. Then looking at just how does this approach maybe just change the way we legally get involved in customer projects and manage our own work when on major projects. And then the future, what the impact on future legal services. There's such a big emphasis on data these days, whether it's personal or sensitive or commercially sensitive or just general projects. The reliance on data, statistics and for decision makings, etc. How's that impacting us as a legal profession? And then hopefully we'll get some good Q&A after this knowledge share at the beginning. Thank you. So the topic background. So basically the topic is focusing on project data as opposed to sort of discrete kind of contract data or discrete sort of ancillary document data. So when one is instructed as a lawyer on a major project, I sympathise with external lawyers because of discrete kind of instructions and a limitation in what one is provided by the customer. But what I'm trying to get into here is the general overall project data of the customer. My experience, having worked 8 years ago, I was in-house. Well, I wasn't in-house. I was trading as a projects lawyer at Essex County Council. The council was one of my clients, inverted commas. And I think with that experience, I had quite free access and reign across that sort of local authority data spectrum. But actually, when I looked at kind of the quality of some of their existing contracts, the actual data, when I actually looked at management data on contract performance, the overall picture was just not clear at all. And I sort of I kind of accepted that was the general position and approach. But as I have moved on, and especially on sort of more national programs with government, I I cannot see how that can be an acceptable approach anymore, because the types of difficulties that we're getting into is actually pushing, I think, the customer further away from a sort of a protected legal position. I know that sounds maybe a bit controversial, but I feel that I have been limited sometimes in what I can do to protect the client, the program, because of the lack of access to data across that program. And actually I have seen where project teams themselves are disabled from being able to continue their role in delivery because they have not had access to what actually the basic contract has said. And also the project experience itself has been immense for me, because I've been so close to customer that I've seen how they actually move these projects on, not in the necessarily, I've got a public sector hat on, but I'm sure some of it does resonate with private sector major projects. So what I'm trying to say is the project kind of moves on without the data following it. So what you end up is a discrepancy between whatever data the project has is actually quite removed from what is actually going on. And I kind of see that as a major problem, especially when you're on the customer side and not being in a position in real time to be able to support because of that lack of sort of access to what is actually going on the ground. And I think that's a major barrier and challenge in projects generally across other parts of the team, not just legal at all. And this to me seems like a huge, this is why I've used the language key, which we'll talk about, because if we can resolve this as an issue, I think we're going to unlock some serious project success for everybody. When I look at the second bullet, on topic background, so having had this experience and thinking, gosh, how can we open up this kind of project data issue and access and visibility, I started experimenting with developers. It was at a stint in a big 4 firm, and I just was I got so much traction from major customers as to the cost benefit if this could actually take place, if we could actually build sort of a coded platform on which to put project data or even complex contract type data, so that we can enable access, enable collaboration, enable real-time searches, watch impact assessment, and I know there's a lot of technology out there that does kind of do that, but this is about the one-stop solution. And that's really, I think, what people are always looking for, is a one-stop solution, not just discrete solutions on projects willy-nilly. It's kind of that big bang so that everybody's on the same platform. Adoption and adaption. So there's obviously the adoption curve with tech generally. When one is implementing something new, you've got a sort of a small group actually that will be willing to adopt something new. And then the majority will slowly adopt once that sort of first group has kind of tested it. We see that with kind of any kind of famous sort of designer device type thing, and you get the kind of the techies at the front of the line, and the ones that kind of want to know that it does work properly will sort of be towards the back of the line, and then you've got the ones that may never adopt and just continue on a sort of a traditional approach, which is all okay. But once you have adopted, you then need to adapt, and adapting is, for a major project, a huge task. And we don't, generally the word transformation just sends, shivers down people's spines when they realise, oh my goodness, is that a round of redundancies and change? And I saw it twice at Essex within sort of 18 months, and it wasn't pleasant to see. And so I'd rather use the word transformation. This is about adaptation. This is about using technology to automate, discover, analyse, to enable those individuals to do a better high quality task and actually be the human in the project, not the robot. So moving on to the sort of penultimate bullet point, benefits realisation. So once we've adopted the new approach, adapted to a new approach, then you start to realise the benefits across the programme. Now, the chaps that I co-founded Athensys with, they actually started in they are engineers, and they developed in their project in MOD, and that benefits realization curve for use of tech in major projects in MOD has been slow, but once that starts to kind of, you know, the story is, oh no, you can do that much better, and people are starting to talk to each other, and you know, you're all becoming on side rather than fighting against each other and being protective over work. So benefits realization is really important, and it's more of a sort of it can only be a fan-based type discovery in a market. There's no, you're either getting the benefits or you're not, you know, and if you're not, then that approach, that tech, that whatever is going to die. But this is really important, I think, why the legal profession needs to be aligned with what those developments are in the market in order to be, I think, even better lawyers and be alongside, be part of that benefits realization, which I hope we go into in a moment. But then with that benefits realization, we are going to hit market disruption. And, you know, there are going to be sort of jobs that would have been otherwise gone to consultancies, lawyers, etc., that now are being automated, and, you know, kind of weeks and months of sort of work could actually just turn into an automated robotic task, which is part of the movement. So it's kind of taking the bull with the horns, with the two horns, and saying, right, this is the reality. Where do we sit about with it, you know? And are we adopting it in our practice in order to, you know, provide that service to the client, or are we actually going to promote enablement of the client so that they are internally adopting the software? That's just two different approaches to the same problem. Sorry, I'm just trying to. So basically, the meaning of the title of the topic I chose was so to identify sort of why is data, project data, so important to the success of projects. And I actually think I think this is a controversial title. I don't think everybody agrees with me because of the challenges I have had when working on major projects myself. So 10 reasons. So when I'm talking about visibility, right, I'm not talking about a new filing system. I'm not talking about somewhere where we've got a shared platform like OneDrive or what have you for us to find similar documents. I am talking about shared documents, but I think what I'm really talking about is like the platform of the living, breathing, and when I'm talking about sort of project data, so it'd be everything making up that agreement so far as we possibly can as a project with the customer. So even really this data sits at the heart of the program. Now, whatever legal's role is, or is instructed by that customer, use the data in that program on that platform, and basically, I think with that customer data, access to that customer data, which is now sort of a digital type access. So it's, if you can imagine a kind of a Google search engine, so where you're running a search and I'm sure many of you use sort of AI search tools. You know, I've seen quite a lot around the last few years. None of them have done what I've been looking for on a major project. What I'm looking for on a major project is something that's going to enable the customer to reduce risk, enable those kind of testing teams to make sure they have access to all the testing provisions and maps, etc. Enable the change control teams to do an absolute impact assessment on change, and ensure that when that change is implemented, every provision, every part of the project data is correctly impacted. You know, there's time and time again, there has been a contract change, but the implementation may have failed to make a change sort of in a particular part of the document, therefore there's an obligation that's continued for many years unnoticed, and then it becomes an issue later. I mean, these kind of case study user case scenarios is what we're trying to, what my vision, my movement with Athensys, my ambition for projects to kind of reduce the risks that I've experienced in dispute, experienced on the back of just a lack of data, lack of evidence, lack of credibility for the client. So visibility is really about bringing that data out of an unstructured environment. When I say unstructured, I'm talking about Word, PDFs, sort of Excel spreadsheet type stuff, and actually getting it onto this platform. These platforms exist where, you know, it's now on a kind of a coded basis. This is the tech world raw, you know, it's not now waiting for big prime tech providers products to come out. This is sort of development from scratch, but actually this is where the realization of true benefits of technology come from. So data, it's a new way of receiving data, and that could be a whole new topic. But that for me is visibility, is putting English language documentation onto a coded platform, so that now you're dealing with a living, breathing type document rather than, I think it is still a document, but it's outside of the kind of traditional formats that we've been used to for the last 20, 40 years. The data itself, so your data could be yourself as your legal data, your legal little, you know, your kind of set of instructions, if you like, and you're managing that. I think that's probably more applicable to external advisors in terms of, you know, they can only work on what they've been provided and what they're delivering for the client. I think if you're more kind of closer into the project, you've got access to kind of the customer's entire program data. But what that data is it good enough? And it's kind of testing where the gaps are, what needs, how can we make this data really, really work for the project? Paying lip service to data, which has been generally my experience, and then leaves the customer high and dry when they need to sort of defend themselves, what have you. How do we make sure that quality and that level of data, and which is constantly maintained on a joined up platform, really does support the project for success? Key, I say key because so many projects are suffering, and my firm belief is the common thread of that challenge for many major projects is the fact that they may have lots of data, don't get me wrong, but it may be different versions of the same document or something like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about latest, conformed, nice, clean, slick, know exactly your position, get it recorded, get everybody on the same page. Whether or not it needed to go through an approval or what have you, you know, have a mechanism in place where everybody is kind of on that understanding as to what those changes and things look like, and that you haven't got the backlog of changes because they're being implemented in much more real time because you've got the technology and capability to do that. Project success then, so my view, my hypothesis if you like, is if we get this project data up to the quality standard that I think I would like to have seen on some of the major projects, I strongly believe that would have helped with the entire successful delivery of that project in a much better way, and benefited the individuals working on those projects. And I think it would have created a kind of a less stressful type situation. Many of the situations I've been in and have experienced have been, quite frankly, quite stressful and not in line with well-being. You know, the more I hear of a well-being type seminar in process, the more I think, gosh, it's because the organisation is under real stress. And I think if we can get the data situation much more under control, managed, and in line with real, true core technology that is available, rather than off-the-shelf type, you know, product that isn't necessarily suitable for the size and magnitude of the types of work that I'd say most of us on this call are dealing with, and that's fitness for purpose. That's what I'm talking about. Technology that is fit for purpose, that isn't costing anyone an arm and a leg, just enabling everyone to do their jobs better. That has to be getting closer to success. Right, so the 10 reasons that I've identified, now they're in no particular order, and they're definitely non-exhaustive, because, you know, this is a major area, and I'd welcome anyone's feedback, additions, criticism, what have you, but it's really just to get the conversation going with legal colleagues, really. So the first reason why I'm saying that visibility of data is key to project success, the first reason is to structure that data. Yeah, once that data is structured, as I mentioned before, you're taking them out of all these different types of formats that simply you cannot search properly in real time, and you're putting them on a coded platform, so that suddenly that technology is just spitting out, if you like, the relevant information that that particular project owner needs in order to get on with their project, without having a delay or expense of having to find this data. The data is, if the data is there, it should be accessible. At the moment, the data may be there, but it may not be that accessible. So structured data, I'm saying, is a game changer for major projects. And I say that because I have not seen one major project that I've worked on that has worked off structured data. It's always worked off unstructured data that's very difficult to search through, doesn't connect to each other, and unless through words, and you can't impact assess that set of data set easily, if at all, in terms of 100% accuracy. It just doesn't happen. So basically what structuring data does is now introduces computers into the competition of the human challenge. So, who can do the search faster, the human or the computer? It's a bit like the AI development behind the chessboard online. This is the same sort of thing. Who can actually come up with the results of a search that is needed in order for someone to do their job properly? The human or the computer. That's what you can start doing and testing once you've got your data structured. 2, searching turns into an automated task. With the computer, you are getting close to 100% data extraction accuracy. You're getting into real time. We all experience, searching on Google, for example. And that is not just against one document, it's against the whole project data suite. That then combines the computer power with the human skill, and lawyers so professionally highly trained, teams do make money, I know, out of doing these kind of onerous, laborious tasks. I understand that model, but this is the change. This is we know we have access to this technology that will change all this. Does it have to have an impact on fees? I don't think so. In fact, what they're going to be getting is a better quality result from the legal advice. Legal are getting hold of the documentation, the data they need to do their job quicker. I've heard of sort of QCs being instructed on major highway type, disputes, turning around an advice and an opinion in a couple of weeks, when they've had to get through thousands of pages of road type documentation. Had they used kind of the technology that's available to get through that and get the stuff that they needed, I bet to God they would have made the same money and had come up with a much better opinion, in my view. But that's just a hypothetical analysis. But that really is where I think this is going. 3, management and use of major projects has fundamentally changed. Now, again, this could be controversial. People may not agree with me, but in my view, having worked on contracts, the contracts have generally sat in a locked cupboard. Commercial will tend to work from the contract, which is, we know, out of date because it hasn't had the conformed contract changes implemented on it. And nobody knows how long some of those changes are going to take, which is fine. But in a way, you need to be kind of working off what is the kind of the hypothetical, at least up-to-date contract. So we know when we're moving forward that the new change is correctly impacted. You know, this is just, we're on a back foot the whole time. So my point being is, as these projects have gotten bigger and bigger and more complex, you know, for a lawyer to be able to do their job properly, I can only imagine that we need to be absolutely on top of that contract. And the way that those contracts are kind of managed in this kind of unstructured environment makes it near on impossible to know exactly what impact changes are happening as they're coming through in this kind of new agile type environment that's been adopted. So technology can really, really help close that gap, that risk. Point 4, introduction of agile in projects outside of software development has become, now I can only speak from the projects I've been on, but I've seen the adoption of an agile approach on major national programs regardless of the legality status. So there might be advice on that agility, and I'm specifically talking public sector projects, but at not one point has that held back the movement of the project into kind of a major change project. Now, those contracts I doubt they were written in the sense to enable that size of type of change, but you know, it's about helping the client, it's about making projects move forward, it's about success. Now, this is where data becomes the contract. So if you have the project data suite on the structured platform, as I said, then you're capturing, in essence, you're facilitating the capture of the changes in a much more user-friendly cross-major program world, rather than maybe the agile decision-making happening at the top, as where the contracts were written in the first place, and then it's not feeding itself all the way down the project chain, so that, you know, the people down on the ground, the testing guys, the delivery guys, you know, they just do not simply have access to the types of the raw contract agreement provisions, generally speaking, and they kind of just going on sometimes on a whim as to what it is they're meant to be doing, and that's just not fair on them. And what I'm trying to promote is getting whatever the movement of the project is if it is agile or what have you, if it's on a platform that's accessible by everybody on that program, surely that's going to enable a greater potential for success. I've said here that I think the fundamental nature of major projects is changing fast, and actually we may see another change now. Well, we all know that it's changed because of COVID, but it may, you know, the new normal, if you like, may slow down kind of the rate of change. But you know, I have felt the law is behind the curve on that fast moving pace change, and that the law in a way should, I think, kind of come and focus back on the data, so that if you've got your data across your project in order, real-time searchable, accessible, processable, impact, you know, accuracy high, speed fast, you know, that's the type of thing that's going to de-risk the project and provide more certainty for success, which all parties are looking for, not the law dragging everything behind and actually then being left behind because people aren't respecting it as maybe they should have done, or maybe they shouldn't have done because it's not helping them. But anyway, 5, role of legal support in projects. Now I've now included the word data management, will be more critical if the lawyers understand correctly the importance of project data, and then apply principles behind the use of project data. So this goes deeper than just paying lip service to, you know, meeting the regulatory requirements on data, all, you know, using a shared OneDrive type filing system on. This is about data enablement for people to be able to really do their jobs properly, reducing risk, improving communication, facilitation, and actually, you know, had some of this been implemented prior to this COVID lockdown, you know, maybe some of those major projects could have functioned. I mean, there might be some catch up that needs to be done once this phasing is out, like behaviours, changes, activities that have happened that have moved on, but the kind of normal administrative background hasn't sort of caught up with it because of the isolation of everybody. You know, that potential platform, that management off a platform may have just facilitated that kind of real-time movement of a project, so it wasn't as badly impacted as it has been without that platform in place. Sorry, I hope that makes some sense. Right, so point 6. Now this is an observation and something that I'm very keen to see, especially in major public projects, is the preservation of objective data. So we have a data set in which all parties to the project kind of agree is the agreement between the parties, you know, and it can be so maybe a subsection off that collaborative platform, the customer project data, if you like, but at the same time, this is about minimizing dispute, minimizing conflict, not to kind of lean on the other side of, say, enabling supplier approvals of things that they shouldn't be approved of or anything like that. That's not what I'm talking about. This is about, we all know who's doing what, when, how much we're paying for it, and you know, kind of what I'm alluding to is that if, rather than the supplier contract, the customer contract, the kind of the project data, if you like, is an overarching collaborative type platform where we know that there's a specific data suite that we know is objective. We don't have to go, we don't have to, you know, the customer doesn't feel like it has to come in and out of this meetings and discussions to go back and reflect with the lawyers to come back in again 2 weeks later, which is all very impactful and damaging to the project itself. It's kind of enabling and foreseeing methods in which we're helping the parties move the project on in the best interests of the customer or our client. And sometimes the way types of negotiations and things do happen just haven't helped the customer in the way that they are trying to work. So I mean, an example of feedback I get from customers is, you know, they kind of ask for some feedback on a document and they end up with a load of comments that really means that the customer themselves have to go and do about half a day or a day's work just to get through sort of the lawyer's comments. Now, I think what we're looking for is just something more objective and workable with the parties, possibly without the intervention of lawyers, but actually if the lawyers are kind of involved in that, maybe as in a kind of a mediator type role to try and help facilitate and manage the fact that data is objective and the parties can move on from that part of the platform, that could be potentially extremely useful. Role of legal project management cuts vertically. So what I'm saying here is the vertical instructions are the sort of discrete, look at that work stream, look at that document, look at that matter, for example. But what I'm calling out here is with better data and access to kind of more of the overall project, lawyers can actually add so much value by calling out where other things outside of those vertical instructions can be improved and worked on, because it's those horizontal, kind of underlying, consistent, you know, legislative compliance, some sort of transparency, temperature check, make sure everything's, you know, decisions are being captured, making sure, you know, conflicts, perceived corrupt practices, you know, can they just be looked at bravely, and, you know, just kind of protect the client, not the individuals. And it's not to threaten individuals, but it's just to say we could play a bigger role, you know, and for the benefit of project success. And a lot of that will come down to data, you know, where's that certificate that basic, or where's that justification report to determine why we took that route rather than the other routes, you know, where that, and that business continuity aspect as well, you know, can we make sure that when someone big leaving the project, I'm not saying that's a lawyer's role, but actually, you know, it's part of the general de-risking of projects, you know, duties, if you like, on project staff. And I think data should be always playing a major role in this. But my point being is I haven't seen it, and all I've seen is felt the consequences of the fact that it's not being done properly, and it's just happening for me over and over again. And this is just where I'm calling out this project title, quite frankly. So yeah, so just enhancing that added value to projects by becoming more sort of involved in the wider project data of the customer. Number 8, introducing collaborative practices between legal and customer. Just to say that, you know, using the data, improving that collaboration between the lawyers in the customer teams, just to kind of maybe lean up on the practice of, you know, customer having to come up with loads and loads of information. Is that information traceable in the wider project data set? Sort of enabling the customer to kind of crack on with the focus of their project, if you like, rather than going backwards. And with that, basically building a long-term relationship so that legal's role is right through project life, you know, not just at the beginning of a project. And I know that probably is one of the main objectives of lawyers going into these projects, is to have that long-term relationship. But I think those relationships would be really valuable if we have that opening up of project data across the customer suite, and helping them, enabling them to kind of put together, maintain quality project data that is accessible via tech. Getting my 9th reason is about, yes, project data volume and project data management. Getting the volume and management of data correct is critical for project success. And I say that because if you haven't got enough data, project data, then you kind of could be questioned. The project could be questioned credibly. Its credibility can be questioned, and then trust. You know, there's no accountability without the data, audit trails, etc. However, there's the opposite of having too much data, which then kind of crushes the efficiency of the project and the ability of people to get on with their jobs, and actually can affect morale if there's just too kind of an overwhelming amount of data to get through. So that's quite an interesting, and that really might be part of the way the strategy of the program is set out, and legal has got a voice in that, as to kind of what is the efficient management and volume of data that is how is it going to be run across potentially that collaborative platform. 10th reason I've looked at is the visibility of data. The lawyers I've said who kind of understand this kind of the value and practical approach to protect customers using structured data I think will be the leaders in the profession on this, because if you're running programs that you've had an input, or they're working in this particular way of using, not, we have moved away from sort of formatted, unstructured documentation into kind of a coded language type world, that has happened, seems to have happened in other industries, but not necessarily on major projects and legal. That is going to be the tipping curve, I think, for real disruption in legal services, because in this particular arena, because once those lawyers working with sound structured project data, working with the automation, the computer, they're not going to be able. You can't compete with that as a human only service. It's just not possible, in my view. So I just wanted to sort of point that out, that the computer's only going to work well if it knows it's got the data to search, and we've kind of coded it in the way to kind of work so that data is working best for the customer and us. And those lawyers that kind of have that relationship with technology and data, in my view, are going to be pretty unstoppable. Right, so sorry, Lauren, I think we're kind of over that first 30 minutes, but I'll just crack on unless you tell me otherwise. The need for change in legal project management. So these are just kind of questions, really, to put to the profession about understanding the gap between what we're doing for customers at the moment with how we should be doing things for customer. And I say how we should be doing things for customer now, not in the future. The traditional ways of working with customers are still in place, and I think there's a lot of room to close a gap of how other services are being provided to customers outside of legal that we should be adopting and putting into our practices, without threatening the profession, but at the same time being realistic as to what the demands of customers currently are. How is the profession moving close to the gap? How is the profession moving to close this gap? So are you a firm or a lawyer waiting for your off-the-shelf solution? Oh, thank you very much, I'll buy that now. Or are you the lawyer, the profession that's investing in developers, experimentation, and in a way, does it matter? Well, I think this is to do with the adoption curve, and obviously there are plenty of firms with the money that can actually invest and are heavily into kind of AI, etc. Question is, if that's top secret stuff, that's fine, but I'm just from a major projects point of view, best practice in there as soon as possible would be really welcome. So it's about what type of profession we are in terms of knowledge share. We're good at knowledge sharing online with our views on certain areas of law and everything like that, but I kind of don't get the feeling that in legal tech it's quite as open and sharing as I would have liked it to have been. I sort of see off-the-shelf development type startups, and I know what I've been doing internally, but I haven't really kind of understood what the secret weapons of other law firms are and what they're investing in. It's quite interesting, and haven't quite found the forum in which to kind of have those kind of more open discussions about that. Are legal project professionals moving towards a more project data focused role rather than the traditional contract/services approach? Now this is the rub of the title, really. I'm more and more, I'm sort of seeing this as about a role that is definitely to do with project data. It's not just about writing a good contract, it's about how is that contract going to generate the best result for the customer right throughout project life, and make sure we are putting together and establishing the right practicalities, collaboration, internal and external, in order for project success, not just a them and us approach on a sort of a services type contract or what have you, project delivery contract. What's your reflection statement? All right, so my next slide, we don't have to go through it now, but you might want to read it. It's just my reflection on my position in public projects, and it's not a bad exercise, I think, for project lawyers, wherever you are, to reflect on the entirety of your customer issue, if you like, the project data environment entirely, and where you can add more benefit, more value. Whilst we take instructions from customers, is there room for legal project management to assert more value for the customer through the tech, and opening up access to data for greater project success? Well, I think that's just an overall question. A lot of that we've touched on to get to this point, and it's kind of honing in on, it's not about searching and selling more services to some extent. It's about being a better lawyer for the customer on their major project, with access to the data, and building in improvements where I think they're really genuinely needed. So sorry, that was my reflection statement, but I'll just skip over that because I don't think we've got time. And then I've just sort of touched on the future of what I think the legal profession needs to be sort of heading for. You know, those who embrace the opportunities for faster, more accurate and collaboration data access for customers, I think, are the ones that are going to be going forward. Accelerate. The landscape for lawyers has already changed. We're changing, but it has fundamentally changed already. Lawyers that have gone out and basically taken time to sort of start developing and finding solutions themselves rather than waiting for off-the-shelf products. So now when those real effects start to show, you know, that's going to take some time, but it's the reality that divide is already happening, even in this working from home type lockdown environment, you know, which firms were ready, which weren't. And then the kind of, the separation of those embracing automation activity to provide the top advice from those lawyers that are practicing still in a more automated role. Just that kind of separation of roles within the industry being more articulated through the adoption of technology. And my expectation is we're going to have a leaner and a much more highly valuable legal profession rather than industry because of this introduction and embracement of tech. Right, so,
thank you, it was great. And I think the clear message really is working smarter, not harder, and really using data to really enhance what we can offer. We've had three questions come in, so that's great. So we can kick off with them. But for the attendees, if you do have any questions, statements that you want to leave, please put these into the questions or the chat box, and I will give these across to Sophie now. So we'll get started. I've got a question here, or a bit of a statement from Jason Bowers. He said, whether you store contractual data on a digital platform, for example, an up-to-date searchable PDF, will the issues of data being out of date and missed still remain unless the right roles carrying out the right responsibilities are addressed? Communication between project members and those specialists are also key. In other words, improved project governance, but might be more of a root of the problem in a digital platform for data, which might not solve this. So your thoughts around that would be great, Sophie.
Right, okay. There's a lot in that question. I just missed the first bit, Lauren. Sorry. Yeah,
sure.
could you just actually just read that again? Just so I can note.
That's fine, no problem. So he's asked whether you store contractual data on a digital platform. So, for example, an up-to-date searchable PDF. Will the issue of the data being out of date or missed still remain unless there's the right roles and responsibilities in that organisation with them being addressed? So communication between project managers and those specialists are key. In other words, improved project governance might be more of a root problem, and a digital platform for digital data might not solve this.
Yeah, I mean, I think, okay, so the focus of today's talk was the data, project data. Now, improved governance is always going to make a huge sort of impact on the success of a project. And actually, the very fact that we're looking at a kind of a promotion of a new project data environment by its very self will warrant a new kind of way of working and governance structure. Now, on these kind of collaborative type platforms, these kind of coded platforms, the beauty of them is that you can actually, as a project, set the kind of administrative and roles, if you like, decision-making powers to change. And that would be it. Governance is absolutely key in this whole sort of hypothesis of approach, that you know, how we manage that kind of project data room will need to be absolutely set out as part of that program strategy and governance structure. Now, and so they're naturally aligned is governance with the project data, and I still think that is quite a new way of thinking, because governance at the moment, Jason, you alluded to communication. Now, communication is a huge challenge on a major program, as we all know, which is why again, project data on a collaborative platform is that kind of keeps that project data up to date in real time, is going to be a huge barrier lifter to the communication problem as well. And actually, I think if you've got sort of accountable governance structure in the project data platform, so we have kind of work streams. This is something else in terms of project management overall needs looking at, because at the moment we kind of fixed, especially in government, is these kind of delivery teams, commercial teams, finance teams, legal teams. You know, we've siloed these kind of areas of expertise rather than looking kind of more sort of horizontally, if you like, at what needs to be done across the program. What are the modules that are going across the project data, and where the responsibility lies in terms of structure on that? Because I think part of the kind of fact you've got a change control team sitting in isolation, and they've then got to make all these communications and get the governance and approvals for that change. Now, that change team, in my view, as an example, could actually, the change can come from the module. So if you've got a module that's in charge of implementation, then why is it not implementation that's in charge of actually managing that change? And then through that, you've got, you know, within that, you've got the governance. And then if you've got kind of cross sort of hierarchy type decision making that's required, then we build that in. But in my view, the way this approach and this topic is this afternoon, and it's a real privilege to speak to people, to speak to you about this, is can we rethink it? Can we rethink it? And as lawyers, I think are we in a strong enough position to challenge and promote and encourage something new that incorporates not just project data, it encourages better governance and better communication across the programme, because ultimately these are the things that risk projects in the long run and end up in a dispute. Thanks, sorry. Yep.
Thank you, Sophie. We have a question here from Nicoletta. She says, can too much data can it negatively affect the project, having too much data?
Sorry, that was Nicola, was it, Lauren?
Nicoletta.
Nicoletta, thank you, Nicoletta. Yes, yeah, I touched on that point. So volume of data and the management of it, you know, the time in which you're sort of allowed, you know, you're allowing yourself to spend kind of in that, on that particular role, I think is extremely important, and it's essential that it's gotten right. Too much data, to my mind, can crush a project and crush individuals as well. And as I said, a lot of feedback I get from customers is where they've ended up with, you know, they've gone for legal advice, for example, but they've come back with a load of questions, and customer then looks at it and thinks, I can't believe it, I haven't got time to respond to every one of these questions. And that's just an example of where legal just needs to maybe adopt a new way of working with project customers so that we can be driving efficiency. Yeah, we can't be telling anyone else to be efficient if we can't be driving efficiencies ourselves. And I think I learnt a lesson probably at Essex where, you know, I used to review a document and I think, okay, well, what legal indemnity do you want for that? What do you want for this? You know, have you thought about this? And it's, you know, it really has sunk in quite quickly there. They haven't got time. You've kind of got to come up with the solution. You've got to come up with the drafting. You've got to be brave. Call it out to them, maybe, but find this new way of working so that even lawyers are not putting more work and more data on the customer. The leaning up and simplification and smarter working, as Lauren alluded to, is essential. It's like a responsibility, actually. And actually, that could be a whole new webinar. But yeah, that's really important not to overload on data.
Perfect.
Which is why versions, yeah. I say version control is just important. Yeah,
definitely. We've got 4 minutes left and we've got a few questions to get through. So if we don't get through them all, what I'll do, Sophie, is I'll pass them over to you via email and I will respond to the people that have asked them directly. Pleasure. Perfect. And if you are open for future webinars, we can always do that. So Philip Snowden has said, is there scope for people outside the legal profession becoming legal project managers? So from an APM's point of view, we see project management as a transferable skill. But from your legal angle, what would your vision on this be?
So in a way, I need to understand the question. So it's about people outside of the legal profession becoming legal project managers.
Yeah, so say for example, you could have someone that's a project manager in construction or in life science. The skill set of a project manager is transferable, but they won't have that legal knowledge. Do you think someone could go from a different sector into the legal sector and become a project manager with the right training?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good question, Philip. I think I would say that I think it would be brilliant if it could happen, because I would say there's probably loads of experience out there that understands kind of the legal risks and things, you know, consequences for not doing things in a certain way, and then coming into a project and actually being responsible for that legal project management. What I would suggest is that there is some sort of course that may not actually exist at the moment, I don't know, but you know, like an ILEX course or just something, just so that new role into it as a non qualified solicitor or what have you into a legal PM role. I definitely can see that happening very, very well. All I would say is I would probably suggest there's a qualification that would need to be just put in place, just so that you kind of those applicants, or they just get some of these kind of basic legal skills, because you know, solicitors, barristers have been trained quite intensively, and there'll be some sort of certain skills, and maybe the role description of what a legal project manager is, you know, because drafting and things, that is, you know, to check drafting and check those implications, you know, impacts and things, you know, to take on that responsibility, I think would need just a bit of training, basic training, just to make sure that's the qualification, you know, they've got that kind of qualification for assurance really for the program. But yeah, no, that's I would promote that, to be honest.
Thank you, Sophie. Just to follow up on that, Philip, I don't know if you're an individual member, but within individual membership of APM, we do offer a career pathway. So it will kind of help you transverse from one sector to another. I do see that you've asked what qualifications one might need for a career change, so that would be helpful for you to look into that. We have got to 1:30. We've only got 3 questions to get through. We don't have another webinar scheduled, so I think we could probably get away with squeezing one more in. So let's just have a look what we've got here. Ursula has said, even when a contract is shared and accepted by a supplier and a customer, can the customer still interpret it differently to suit them, especially when there is a cost involved? So Sophie, what would your advice be in this situation?
Yeah, so I think this touches on my one of the reasons was to kind of just get a set of objective data sort of ring fenced, if you like, where we know that maybe that's part of, maybe that's an access area where sort of customer and the third party can have access to the latest version of the conformed contract. So what I'm trying to say is currently at the moment on major projects, I haven't seen, or even big complex contracts, you know, conformity of the latest contracts may take place over the course of a year or maybe once a year as an exercise. So really we haven't actually got that kind of latest objective data, that objective view that kind of really determines what that agreement is between the parties at the time. And then when you're meeting with the supplier or what have you, based on that objective data, the interpretation should, in theory, the interpretation of the data itself should be pretty straightforward if it's a well-drafted contract. I think it would be more of the issue around events around what that data said around performance or payment or what have you, you know, the what happened when, and the point being of by having more robust, higher quality data, so we have kind of those kind of better recording as to what's been happening in terms of performance, then again that's driving that data to become more objective for both parties to kind of understand. At the moment, without the data, we've got a wide window for interpretation. So by ensuring we're getting better quality real-time data, we are closing that gap of where customers and suppliers are sort of have a big wide room to interpret. And I think there's always going to be room for interpreting. If there is a cost benefit to play for the customer by arguing X, that's fine, but we need to be clear as the lawyers, you know, what is the overarching objective of the customer. If it's to get project success rather than disputing a sort of a particular point on maybe not such a large sum, you know, you need to weigh out what is the overall goal and the prize, if you like, for kind of getting that result in that discussion. So I think the idea of the project data is to kind of just improve project data is to close the gap of interpretation. That is what we're trying to achieve, so that we're in collaboration and moving forward. And I accept that's not going to be easy, but at the moment, without the data, we've got too much interpretation. Let's put it that way.
That's great, thank you, Sophie. So I'm going to bring this webinar to a close. We do have some questions left over, so I'll email those to you, Sophie, and then I will get back to the few that are remaining. Thank you for your knowledge and the share. We've had some really great questions and a lot of good engagement. The webinar is recorded. It'll take me about 3 to 4 working days to edit and get this up on YouTube, but I will email that to all of our attendees. And feel free to look Sophie up on LinkedIn. I'm sure she'll be glad to connect and see where future opportunities can take you all. So stay safe, everyone. Take care, and thank you very much for joining today.